And we're back. We've been listening to family stories, and we've got an incredible storyteller with us tonight. She's known for telling family stories, adaptations of oral histories, traditional tales. Oh, let's just say it, she does it all. She's been a feature teller at the National Storytelling Festival here in Jonesborough, and she is this week's teller in residence at the International Storytelling Center. Let's welcome to the stage Dolores Hydock.
Good evening, hi. As Lori said, we've been telling family stories and hearing family stories, and so I have a family story for you tonight as well, but it's a story that set a couple of wars before the Vietnam era. My dad was not a veteran. When World War II began, my father was 22 years old and already working at the Glenn L. Martin Company in Baltimore, Maryland, building airplanes. And so, though his three brothers signed up in the service, 2 in the Army, 1 in the Navy, my father spent the war with rolling 30-day deferments as a defense industry specialist. He was not particularly happy about that. He was not pleased about that. In fact, he was kind of embarrassed about that. All of his brothers, all of his buddies were in uniform, and he felt he was not really doing his part. But his employer and my mother convinced him that he was doing exactly what people needed him to do, that he was doing what his brothers and his buddies and the rest of the country needed. They needed someone just like him, someone dedicated and precise and exact to build those B-26 bombers. And so every month, he and my mother waited to see if that 30-day deferment would get extended. When the war was over, my dad and so many other men like him became fathers to a tidal wave of baby boomers. And these men who had worked and sacrificed to give independence and freedom to other people were now working and sacrificing to give another kind of independence to their children. And that's what this story is about. One year, when I was small, I don't remember why this happened, but we were late celebrating Father's Day. I really and truly do not remember if my dad was out of town, if my mother was sick, but for some reason we celebrated Father's Day 2 weeks late on the first Sunday in July, which happened to be the 4th. And so we combined our 2 family gatherings, Father's Day and Independence Day. My older sister Alice, who was the designated family party decorator, strung red, white, and blue crepe paper streamers in the dining room. A parade of John Philip Sousa marches danced out of the stereo in the living room, and a menu of hamburgers, corn on the cob, and apple pie preceded the presentation of Father's Day gifts to my dad from my 2 sisters and me. From my sister Lisa, there was a box that contained a necktie. From my sister Alice, there was a box that contained a necktie. From me, there was a box that contained a reversible necktie. I had not thought about that family gathering in a really, really long time, but I was cleaning out a closet. I came across this cigar box, this old cigar box full of photographs that were taken with one of those old cameras. Does anybody remember those cameras that you held waist high? Yes? And you'd look straight down, and this system of mirrors and bellows captured this grainy black and white photo of my smiling dad sitting at one end of the dining room table wearing 3 neckties. My sisters and me clustered around him, looking so pleased that our gifts had been so well received and were apparently such a surprise. I never thought about it at the time, of course, but looking at that photograph, I thought, you know, it makes a lot of sense to celebrate those 2 holidays together, Father's Day and Independence Day, because in a lot of ways, that's what our fathers give us, independence. At least, that's what my father gave me. Mothers seem to love us in a way that holds us close to them, but fathers seem to love us in a way that lets us go, that sends us out into the world, able to navigate independently. When I was 6 years old, I got my first real bicycle, not tricycle, bicycle. It was tiny, tan, with little white stars on the fenders and pink and white streamers coming out of the handlebars and training wheels. And the first few times I rode it, my dad walked along beside me, holding me, steadying me, and then before I was ready, and boy, I'll tell you, way before I thought I was ready, he let go and gave a little extra shove and said, "Go on, you can do it. I'll watch you from here." I sailed off down the sidewalk, terrified, but exhilarated too, going under my own steam further and faster than ever before, a gift of independence from my dad. Over the next several weeks, without my even noticing it, my dad started tilting those training wheels up off the ground until they were really purely decorative, not functional at all. And finally, I found the bike there in the garage. It was supported only by the kickstand. I looked over at my dad. He was working under the hood of the black and white Chevy. He didn't even look up at me. He just said, "Go on, you can do it. I'll watch you from here." And I could do it. And my world got wider and faster as I graduated to the metallic blue Schwinn with the basket and the bell. And then the English bike, sleek, black, with razor-thin 26-inch wheels. Then back to four wheels again, the chestnut brown Ford Galaxy 500 that my dad used to teach me to drive. He'd find me on a Sunday afternoon, he'd jangle those car keys and say, "Come on, Schluggo, let's go for a ride." And we'd find some quiet neighborhood where I could practice my three-point turns and my parallel parking. And even today, on those rare occasions when I actually have to parallel park, I can hear his voice in my head reciting over and over like a Japanese haiku. "Aim for the curb in the middle of the space. Now straighten, straighten, watch out for that tree." When I was first learning to drive, I had a habit of constantly checking the rearview mirror, curious, I guess, about what was coming up behind me. It was a habit that drove my dad crazy. He would say to me, "Watch where you're going, not where you've been." Advice I'd do well to follow in the rest of my life journey as well. My dad taught me how to use a socket wrench and a plunger, taught me always to leave extra time at the end of a project to clean up, taught me to measure twice, cut once. Advice I later realized applies as well to love affairs as it does to lumber. In freshman year of college, when my high school sweetheart, Ricky Sedlak, broke my heart by breaking up with me, my dad wrote me a letter of comfort and consolation, a handwritten letter from my dad there in the dormitory mailbox. He had written out the words of a song that he thought would make me feel better. The song went, "When you're feeling all alone in the world and a little bit out of tune, just pick up your hat, get out of the flat, get out and under the moon. Look at the moon's shining face, shimmering all night long, and remember the world is a big old place, but it still needs to hear your song. So whenever you're feeling alone in the world and a little bit out of tune, just pick up your hat, get out of the flat, get out and under the moon." He'd taken the time to write out all the verses. When I was 19 years old and melodramatic and heartbroken, devastated, unable to be comforted by such simple sentiments. "Oh, come on, Dad, yeah, really. Get out and under the moon." But it was another gift of independence from my dad. Advice I just didn't understand yet about keeping things in perspective, picking yourself up, getting on with it. In a lifetime of Father's Day presents, nothing I ever gave him, no belt, no wallet, not even the truly remarkable reversible tie, could ever compare with the gift he gave me, a set of tools and skills and advice to navigate the world independently. All of it given with the kind of love that lets go and says, "Go on, you can do it. I'll watch you from here."
That was just incredible. Thank you. Now, if you're anywhere near Jonesborough, be sure to catch the Teller in Residence programs this week at the International Storytelling Center every day, Tuesday through Saturday at 2 p.m.
I've got my tickets for Wednesday and I'm looking forward to it. Now, Lori, I don't know about you, but I'd like to get back to see how Gary and Sandy are handling the news about his shipping out and their adoption.
Oh, I would too. So let's get back to that story. When we left, Gary just found out he had orders to go out to Vietnam.
When we got approved to get our son and we found out that I was being sent out, we thought, well, it's not going to happen. Why would they give a newborn baby to a guy that's going off to Vietnam?
It's going to happen, Gary. We have to have faith. We're going to have our child, and you are going to come home, and we will have our family.
I had to go and find the judge and tell him I'm shipping out in a week.
I know. We've checked your background. We know you're leaving, but it's all right. They want you to have this baby no matter what. We know you'll be coming home safe. We're all praying for it.
So, we get our son, Brad.
It's a boy, Gary. It's a boy. Isn't he beautiful?
We got our son, Brad, and 5 days later, I ship out. It was a strike force type of unit. As a track commander, I sat on the turret with a machine gun on this side and one on this side, and a modification was a grenade launcher below, down here. We were assigned to the 3rd Marine Division. The Marines only had walking infantry at this point, so we were the mobilized unit that joined up with them at the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. What happened there was the Vietnamese could come across and engage with us and then go back over the border, but we couldn't engage with them unless they came across. They could shoot at us once they went across, but we couldn't shoot back because that was South Vietnam. We spent our time there as targets. I was clicking down the time, and it was about 8 or 9 days I had left, and we were sent out. We go to this camp, and a guy comes out and says, "Hey, Degner, you want to go home?" They had a plane that was flying out. I said, "Well, yeah." So I turn in my M16 and my pistol and get on a flight from South Vietnam to Fort Lewis, Washington. I was still wearing my dirty fatigues. I went straight from assignment to the airplane to home. And they had a place we could get cleaned up, and they had some Class A's to change into. I had to report to the pay officer. I had money coming. I didn't know how much. I reported. They asked me if I wanted to re-enlist. I said no. They gave me $294, and I stood up, saluted, and said, "Now what?"
"You're on your own. You're not my problem now."
I'm in Fort Lewis, Washington with $294, and I don't know even how to get off the post, let alone how to get home. So I called my wife. "Sandy, I just got discharged."
When will you be home?
"I don't know, but I hope soon." So I catch a cab, go to the airport. In those days, service people could wait, fly on standby for free if there was an opening. So I got a flight home after waiting just a little while. The fortunate thing about this whole thing is that, unlike a lot of guys who didn't have a wife waiting for them and a good job, I had an awful lot going for me. So I didn't really have a lot of the post-traumatic stress type effects. I could take that whole experience and put it in a little closet in my mind and lock it up. I never told anyone I was in the service for a long time. I just forgot about the whole situation. So I didn't have a lot of the problems guys had when they came back. The only thing that did happen was after we got back, we got a letter from the Department of Social Services that said they wanted to come out and do a final inspection to see if we were going to be able to keep our son. That was more stressful than anything I faced in Vietnam. At this point, it's been almost a year that my wife had had Brad. Nobody was going to take him away. I was going to make sure of that. Well, the walkthrough happened. Brad was officially ours.
Gary, I have some news.
It wasn't much longer after that, my wife, who we were told could never get pregnant, well, she did. We had our daughter, and that was our family. That was 48 years ago, and we're still together.
What a beautiful story, and I am so glad it had such a happy ending. Now, for those of you who don't know, Gary is our sounds effects engineer for the show, and his wife Sandy, well, she's always just right there in the audience. So let's give her a
You know, that war touched so many of us, tech, crew, audience members, and cast members.
It sure did, and I have my own story about the war. The Army liked to take my husband, and I was left with the little ones. The second time Rick was in Vietnam, Ashford was just a toddler. We couldn't wait to get home every day to see if the mailman had brought a letter. And I would say, "Come on, Ashford, let's go see if Daddy has a letter for us." And we'd get so happy if there was one.
Yay, we got a letter from Daddy.
We'd get a letter from the mailman pretty regularly. Rick was really good about writing, so every week it would be the same thing, and I would say, "Ashford, come on, let's go see if we have a letter from Daddy." Then one day, Ashford was waiting by the window and got excited.
Here comes Daddy. Maybe he has a letter for us.
I looked. It was the mailman.
Mama, how come Daddy only brings us letters but never stays?
Then it dawned on me. I kept saying, "Let's see if we have a letter from Daddy." Ashford thought the mailman was his daddy.
I want to tell you what happened to my brother. He got his draft notice, he'd just gotten out of high school, and he barely made it out of school because of his accident on the farm. You see, a horse had fallen on him and crushed his leg. They had to put a plate in his ankle and his leg, and he was in a cast most of the last part of the year. A month before he reported in, he got his cast off. His leg was still pretty swollen.
They won't take me like this, would he?
Surely not. You're 4F if I ever saw one. Just tell them about your leg.
I will, don't worry.
Well, he reported in for his physical and told the doctor about his leg.
You farm boys will do anything to get out. Well, mister, let me tell you something that's not working with me.
Needless to say, he passed his physical, despite a crushed leg, and was sent to report to San Diego. He'd been on the train 36 hours by the time he got there. He was ready to rest his leg. When he got to his barracks, he listened as the quartermaster named each thing they laid out. Their number 8s, brogans, and skivvies. They lined up at the front of their bunks and were told to answer aye aye to everything. They all headed to the chow line, and he limped his way there. He heard the chief yell at him.
"Straighten up, Yardbird. You're making the whole crew look bad without even trying."
My brother Jack bit his cheek against the pain. The next day, they had them boys marching, and Jack fell out of step. He got cursed again.
Are you just naturally lazy and slow? We'll train that out of you. Everyone gets an extra 5 miles before chow tonight.
None of his crewmates wanted to be seen near him, as he'd been picked out to be a troublemaker. Jack was just trying his best. The next day, they were to stand at attention in the heat. Jack's leg was swelled up nearly twice its size, and he had to keep his laces loose just to fit his shoes on. Standing in formation, the world started to go black. Jack woke up with a medic holding ammonias under his nose.
Did the heat get to you? I've seen it take down bigger men than you, don't worry.
No, it's my leg.
The medic looked at his leg, and it was black and blue and swollen out of shape.
Good grief, man. What happened?
Jack explained it'd been crushed, operated on, and in a cast for the past year.
And you passed a physical like this?
About this time, the chief came in. He was a virtual artist painting his speech with nothing other than 4-letter words. When the medic explained the situation, The chief was furious.
I want this man out of the Navy, out of my sight, now.
My brother, who was now in need of surgery again because of what he'd been through, had to sign papers. First, that he wasn't in long enough to be considered as having served, so he would not receive benefits. It was like being annulled from the Navy. Then he had to sign a paper saying he falsified his records by not disclosing he had an injury or a condition that would keep him from serving his duty. He signed a few more, and then, just like that, he was out. He came back home, his leg healed, and he went back to farming. I'm just grateful to that medic who finally saw what Jack was going through.
I was a medic. I arrived January of 1970. I had my training and a bag of supplies to carry with me everywhere. I'd been in some fistfights. I was steeled up for what I had to do. I even got a little cavalier about it. We were training with new lighter tanks that didn't seem too bad. Then we were making our way from one position to another. The truck in front of us blew up. Bodies were flying everywhere. Nothing hit me like this incident. Like I said, I was used to firefights. But the booby traps, you never get used to those. You never know where they're going to be. You never know if the next step or the next bend in the road is going to be a mine or a bamboo spike in a pit. It blew up in front of my eyes. I ran to help the men who were on the truck. A couple of guys tried to hold me back in case of another mine, but I didn't care. All I was focused on was trying to help those screaming men. But in a minute or so, there was only one left screaming. There wasn't anything I could do for the other guys, but I worked on this one. I did everything I could, everything I knew how to do. But it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough in my bag to do what needed to be done. I worked on him for half an hour after he died, throwing punches at anyone who tried to pull me away. I finally walked away, over in some elephant grass. I don't know for how long. That was 1970, the last time I ever cried.
I hardly knew where I was. I'd never been out of the area. I was out of place. From Boone's Creek, I took basic at Fort Jackson for 8 weeks, and an additional 8 weeks for advanced infantry training. After that, I packed up and went to Vietnam. I guess they figured 16 weeks is enough to get you ready for war, at least if you were infantry. In Vietnam, there was no front. Everywhere was the front. If you were in Vietnam, you were on the front. I got there to the South China Sea. They issued us our duds and our weapons, and immediately we got into the nitty-gritty. Started doing search and destroy missions, combat assaults, and such things. Some people talked about what they were going to do when they got out. Made all kinds of plans. Not me. If you're infantry, you're just cannon fodder. They just use you to get the job done. I didn't make any future plans. I didn't use that time to think about what I was going to do when or if I got out. I kept my head in the game so I could get out. I made it. Some buddies of mine didn't. I tell you what, I grew up in Vietnam.
Daddy had just gotten back from his second tour in Vietnam. I was 5. We were out shopping at the commissary at Fort Eustis, near Patrick Henry Airport, not far from Langley Air Force Base. So, lots of air traffic. We were walking to our station wagon and a plane overhead breaks the sound barrier. Boom! Being near the airfield, my mom and I are used to it. We jump, but then laugh. But this is Daddy's second day back from the war. He was carrying a bag of groceries. We got him fixings for hot dogs and hamburgers. Well, my dad hears the boom, tosses the bag to the ground, and dives across the parking lot under a truck. Everything in the bag splatters everywhere. My dad is laying belly down on the ground, shielding his head with his arms, yelling, "Who's hit? Who's hit?" My mom goes over to him and then starts rocking him back and forth like a baby. I just remember standing in the parking lot looking at this. Other soldiers coming out of the commissary, passing by while all this was happening. The thing I remember the most is that I was the only one surprised. I had nightmares. I knew the world had monsters. I knew something spooked my father, at least, and if it could scare him, it must be pretty awful. I drew pictures of what this boogeyman might look like. Long-nosed demons, wolf men with blood on their teeth, creatures with fire and smoke circling around them. And then one day I found a picture in the trash can from when my dad was in Vietnam. His first sergeant had sent it to him. It was a soldier, his buddy, wearing a necklace made of ears. I don't have to draw pictures anymore. I know what the boogeyman looks like.
I didn't see a lot of combat, but even still, it was hard to keep up morale. Every day was hot and muggy. We were in the middle of nowhere. No stores, no streets, no locals. That was the idea, I guess. Build an air defense base in an otherwise desolate location. Men took turns jumping in the truck, driving across the sand, digging holes to plant the equipment, and then watching the radar for enemy aircraft, which never came. The whole time I was there. But it was war. You never knew. It was the war Johnson promised to keep us out of. The war he sent us into. It was 1965. It was Vietnam. Greatest morale booster came after we were on the ground for 3 months. Large truck loaded with crates of hot beer cans drove into camp. That was the best beer I've ever had. Being in Vietnam, I learned to find the bright side of any situation. Take monsoon season. Aside from being wet and damp all the time, from boot to head, at least we got to shower daily. Rain came every afternoon for months. We dropped our clothes and grabbed our bars of soap, and at night we'd fold our damp uniforms and place them on our boots next to our beds. Wake up and put them back on. Still damp. Despite the daily showers, still dirty. You couldn't escape the mud. When hot beer or daily rain are what keep you going, and you've been sweating and digging in and watching the radar for months and months, it's hard not only to keep up your men's morale, but to find your own. Our perimeter was only a mile from Cam Ranh Bay. Would be a beautiful vacation spot if it wasn't for, well, you know, the war. So one morning when Dick and I had nothing to do, we decided to head down to the beach for some R&R with our air mattresses. Seemed like a good idea. Sun was warm, waves were lulling, Dick and I fell asleep. Next thing I knew, something hard was hitting my head. I opened my eyes to find myself underwater. I swam to the top and grappled for my drifting mattress, and when I squinted, really squinted, I could see the beach. Currents had carried us out, and a massive storm had moved in. Dick! Dick!
Over here!
He was as far from me as I was to the beach, way off to the right. I called to him again. Dick! Dick! I need help!
Help?
Help me!
Help you? I can't even help myself.
I may have outranked Dick, but he was 6'4" and all muscle. He could have been the poster boy for the American Army. If he couldn't help me, I was in trouble. I figured my best bet was to lay flat, cling desperately to the air mattress, and try to ride the crashing waves to shore. It wasn't so much surfing as it was hanging on for dear life, kicking and praying all the way back to the beach. Dick followed my lead, and we made it to shore sooner than me. He had those long legs.
We're not going to tell anyone about this, right?
Not on your life. We headed back. Our air mattresses were rendered useless by now, and we waited for the afternoon monsoon to wash the salt water and the sand from our bodies, not telling anyone of our narrow escape. Probably the only two soldiers who were nearly lost to the war by sunbathing.
We definitely have all different kinds of stories for you tonight. Folks, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Night with the Yarn Exchange on WETS 89.5 FM out of Johnson City, Tennessee.